Good morning, friends. Welcome to this edition of The Quest. Maybe we can all settle down so we can start the session. I'm going to request Reverend Father Thomas Varkey Cherian to say the opening prayer, and thereafter we'll introduce the speaker and the topic, and we'll go into the presentation. Welcome to all of those of you who are attending online as well, and I pray that this session will be a blessed one.
Shall we all stand for the prayer, please? In the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Our gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for yet another Thursday in our life. We are going to hear something very practical, something new, which we are going to hear from Dr. Preethy. We pray that you may be with her. What all we hear, it will touch our heart. That will be beneficial for our future life and also for other patients, those who are coming and seeing us. We thank you for this opportunity, for this quest one more time. We give you all glory, honor, and praise. In Jesus' mighty name we pray. Amen. Please be seated.
Thank you, Diachin. I request those of you who are coming in, please settle down. So this morning it's my joy to welcome actually my own sister, Preethy, who is going to be the speaker for the quest. Preethy is trained in occupational therapy at Christian Medical College, Bello, in the batch of 94, along with my colleague, Dr. Anulekha, the same year. She was trained. Thereafter, she went on to work at Manipal, Kasturba Medical College, for a year and moved on to Loma Linda University in California for her master's in occupational therapy. Thereafter, she had the opportunity to do her PhD in social sciences and occupational therapy in the Wayne State University in Detroit, Michigan. And thereafter, she's continued as a faculty there in Michigan. The reason we have chosen this topic is very close to her heart because my older nephew, that is her son, is also having autism. And that's not something which is easy to live with. So she has left him for a few hours to come here to be with us. And she will mix her personal journey along with her experiences in doing research. She is funded from the National Institute of Health, Bethesda, Maryland, NIH funding for many projects. And hopefully this initial talk and presentation will lead on to perhaps some understanding of collaborations between believers and the Wayne State University which she represents. So that's our hope, and we also pray this session will be meaningful, useful, and maybe some of you may do have relationships with these issues and you will be able to understand. So I'm going to request Dr. Elizabeth Cherian, who is the senior consultant in the pediatrics and also helps in the Child Development Center, to say a few words about autism as an introduction, and then after that I will ask Preethy to share.
Thank you, Dr. Dr. Jacob, can you just put up your hands after 2 minutes? I can go on about autism. Now, I just wanted to introduce the subject of autism by just telling a few words. We define autism by telling it is a qualitative impairment of children who have social problems. It is a qualitative impairment in communication. It is a qualitative impairment in behavior. And 4, qualitative impairment in the way we perceive our sense organs, like touch and smell and sound and all that. Now, don't you think all of us are autistic? All of us are autistic, because when we were small, we have now grown up. We didn't disappear. These traits are present in all of us. So can I say autism is there in everybody? But in pediatrics, I would like to say, if this onset can be demonstrated before 3 years, if you can demonstrate it before 2 years, if you can demonstrate or anticipate it before they come in high-risk babies, then we stand a better chance. Over to you, Dr. Preethy.
Thank you. Use his mic, but you stand there. Okay.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. It's an honor, a privilege to address all of you here. And yes, I tried to make today's presentation more about my personal journey with autism rather than throw my research findings at you. And just one point of correction, I'm not yet funded by the National Institute of Health because much of the money in the National Institutes of Health go into genetic research or diagnostic therapeutic. I'm more in the social sciences, so much of my funding comes from private foundations or from the National Institute of Disability, Independent Living, Disability Rehabilitation Research, which is also a federal institute because I'm more on the social sciences, just had to clarify that. So I tried to organize my talk around my journey. So I'll start with what it meant to be a working mother. I was always passionate about pediatrics. Even when I trained in Vellore as an occupational therapist, I remember even trading my hand therapy posting rotation for a pediatric rotation, right? So I learned a lot. I understood. I wanted to work with children with disabilities, adults with spinal cord injury. Neurological rehabilitation was close to my heart. But along the way, I realized our rehab is only as effective as the family members on the team, especially in Vellore, where the family was a big part of it. If the family didn't understand what we were doing in the clinic, it was useless. So that was really deep inside the journey behind why I pursued a PhD in sociology. So along the way, like you just heard, I did my occupational therapy bachelor's in Vellore, went on to Manipal, worked for 1 year, helped set up a psychiatric unit there with one of my colleagues. An in-house, inside lockdown psych ward we set up, because as occupational therapists, what we care about is your independence in your activities of daily living. We call it occupations. It is not necessarily work. Everything we do. So even in a lockdown psychiatric ward, people have value and worth in their life. And how can we, so we believe in the value of arts and crafts. And when you do something, you have meaning and value in life. That is the common theme, whether you work with children or adults. And after I went to the US, I did my master's, where I learned more about formal teaching methods, administration. While I was doing my family sociology PhD, where I learned a lot about quantitative methods, how to use regression, statistics, how to use modeling to make meaningful predictions out of social science data. So that is who I am as a researcher. You give me data, I can tell you a beautiful story with the numbers, right? So I think in my own life, in my journey, as I started going through diagnosis and treatments and all the challenges that autism brought, statistics was an area that brought me comfort. No, I was not a math expert. I just somehow memorized my way through 10th and 11th and 12th. It was hard, but through all the stress of caregiving, I realized that numbers would never betray me, because now I figured out computer-based software like SPSS to do analysis. All I had to do is tell a story, and I'm a good storyteller. So people have asked me, how did you manage to do research while you were going through all this stress? I said, actually, that is the only thing that gave me comfort, because every time we went to doctors, we would get statements like, you have to live with this. It was a journey of acceptance. But statistics never betrayed me. Even today, there are times I can sit in front of the computer, code my data, and feel good about it. Because I work on this area, I feel like the numbers actually impacts people too. So just a side note, because some people think, oh, I'm a superhuman to be doing statistical research. I was just fortunate to have a good mentor, a sociologist who taught me how to do all this. And in my postdoctoral phase, the first project I got, so in my sociology itself, I didn't study disabilities. We studied all about family values. I studied about a people group in Guyana, which is in the top of South America. It was colonized way back. Like, they had a concept called indentured laborers. Laborers were brought from UP and Bihar as laborers to work in Guyana. And so my professor was Afro-Guyanese. He had a lot of data from there. We were looking at how our cultural values preserved in this people group after living there, because they have a form of language, a form of culture that they think is Indian, but we as Indians don't even think of it as Indian. So numerically, I studied about preservation of values, acculturation, a lot of sociological phenomenon I studied, but nothing about disability, which was a good thing. At that time, as I was going through all this stress, maybe I didn't want to know more about, and I ended up working in hand therapy. So one thing I'll say is never say never. I thought I would never like ortho or hand, but I needed to build some clinical experience. I ended up working as a hand therapist. And the beauty with that stage was it's not like neurology or psychiatry. If you break a hand, you will get better. And as therapists, we are just there as cheerleaders to say, yeah, you'll do better. So those 2 years were fulfilling to me. It was easy. And then in my postdoctoral phase, which is what that fourth triangle is about, my first challenge when I got hired as a postdoctoral researcher, and the reason I gave up my clinical role was life was hectic. With having 2 boys, I was having more children. My oldest son is 21. He's the one on the spectrum. Then I have an 18-year-old and a 14-year-old. So when I had my 18-year-old, it was so hard to balance. When you have a full OP clinic, an outpatient clinic, patients are scheduled as you're going out. One kid throws up on you, one is sick, even though you're depending on your family. Like my in-laws were very helpful. We had formal babysitting. We tried everything, but still it was hectic. That day I remember one day sending an email to somebody on campus saying, I'll even come and work for free, but I cannot handle the stress of clinical work because of this time, right? So research was, even though mentally it's more stressful, it was more flexible for me, and that's all I could do as a working mother. So the first challenge given to me was, because I cared about family quality of life back then. So one secret to grant funding, I know somebody came and said, how can I get grants, is to know what is fundable at a given time. You have to be politically aware, right? So back then, family quality of life, when I say back then, it's 2006, around that time. There was a lot of funding in the US. How do you mathematically measure, because we do a lot of satisfaction surveys after projects, and families say it was awesome, it was great. We pair them with something called navigators who help you try to find services. But they said beyond satisfaction data, there must be a reliable way to find out which families are doing better, who are the ones who improve. For those of you from CDC who are here, we do a lot of ABA, applied behavioral intervention. But some families actually don't benefit from it. They are more burdened. But some do well. How do you explain that? So mathematically, the first challenge to me was to measure family quality of life in a mathematical way. That's how I got on this journey systematically. That's how I brought my social sciences and my disability research together. So in the end, I'll talk a little bit about that research. So just back to autism, I loved how ma'am explained about autism, but this is the present statistics. According to CDC in the US, 1 in 36 children have autism, and they grow on to be adults. So it's no longer a pediatric condition. No matter which field you're in, whether you're a surgeon or a radiologist or a pharmacist, you're going to see these adults come to you. In the US, because of statistics, we know 1 in 45 of them grow on to become adults, while the pediatric incidence is increasing. So this is also going to grow. Globally, we think it's 1 in 100 children, partly because of we don't have as much, the numbers look lower because of surveillance, right? We know the reality is probably higher. As far as quick facts, it's the fastest growing developmental disability. The core features, the way I like to describe it, I loved how ma'am described it as qualitative in all of these. Your behaviors can be stereotyped, repetitive, very restricted interests. So there's a behavioral qualitative issue. You have social reciprocity, the back and forth when people communicate. And even on the high end of the spectrum, when we say we all have a little bit of autism, don't you have a friend that will engage you in a conversation and keep talking, irrespective of the fact that you like it or not? That comes in that second criteria of impaired social reciprocity. Then there's communication impairments in various forms. Some we call, on the low end of the spectrum, we say they are nonverbal. On the higher end, they can be talking without forming relationships. So one other fact I want to say in this third bullet point is there is a myth that all children with autism are very smart. They have savant skills. They can memorize a lot of things. But I want to bring you back to 46% of children with autism actually possess average or above average, meaning less than half only actually have average IQ. So I want you to really remember that. When you think autism, please don't think everybody is gifted and amazing. It's those stories that you hear, right? So many of them actually also have a comorbidity of an intellectual disability, or what we call mental retardation. As far as racial disparities, there is no disparities. The little that we see in the literature is because of socioeconomics. Like, meaning if you have more access, more education, you'll tend to get diagnosed more. So in certain race groups, you might see higher incidence, but it's more about the money and knowledge and awareness. This slide is just to show you how much money has gone into medical research into autism genetics. I'm not here to explain the genes, but everything purple color you see is actually directly related to autism. Any other color you see is possibly related to autism. What I'm trying to say is so much money has gone into trying to figure out which gene. I'm not saying it's pointless. So we know conditions like Fragile X, so many rare disorders have been identified. But at the end of the day, as therapists, the treatment is the same, right? But we have a label, which is important. Sometimes it's good to know because some diagnosis has its own implications about prognosis. My bigger point is this, like Elizabeth ma'am was saying, the earlier we identify, the better. It is possible to reliably diagnose it as early as 18 months, but services only begin by 5 years. Partly the denial, right? In my own son's case, I know around 18 we started suspecting it, but we are hoping it's something else because also he has splinter skills. He could tell me all the names of the US presidents. He could tell me all the states in US, and I was like, okay, that's great, based on just memorizing a placemat. So he did have those splinter skills. So I was part of this denial journey, so I won't blame anyone. But we started services for him at 3 years, partly because of the systems we have in place and the preschools, and so we did get there. But there you will encounter families who don't want to face the label. And I'll give you a few strategies how to work around their fears rather than attacking them with the fears of you better get your child in therapy, because that doesn't work either. The family is going through a journey. And the other point that I got cut off there is only 21% of adults with disability, meaning it's a large statistic, it includes people with autism, are actually meaningfully employed. And even if they are employed, they're only in low menial jobs, like in the US, it's janitorial jobs, cleaning, or working, bagging groceries in a grocery store. Those are really the only jobs the special education system has figured out, aside from the higher functioning children with autism who can be in IT companies with supports. Just to say that employment is a big, the reason I say that is to show you this, the money put into genetic research versus the money put into actually working with these children who are growing up to be adults. Can they meaningfully be included in our communities? I have seen good models actually in some pockets here in India where parents come together and figure out a way to engage these children. So they're not just meaninglessly walking around, nor are they hidden because of societal stigma. So to me, as a therapist, as a social scientist, as a parent, these are my priority areas of intervention. If you're looking, how can I make an impact? Can we create inclusive communities, both in the educational system, right from preschool, all the way to post-secondary education, and in leisure, in the weekends? Can our children come to the parks here? Personally, one of my struggles every time I bring my son here is the lack of adult swings, the lack of adult playgrounds, right? The swings here are only meant for children. Ben struggles with that. And he has sensory needs. We don't have playgrounds, neither in Kottayam, nor Kochi, nor Tiruvalla. That is one of Ben's challenges when he travels. He enjoys air travel, so I don't have a problem. He loves his 13 hours on the airplane with no complaint. But once we get here, parks, we really miss. Inclusive communities are a need. That is a structural issue. It's not up to the children. We outsiders, even if you have nobody with autism, this is a need you can work on. Can we do some advocacy to have playgrounds? Even in the US, it works based on advocacy because we work with low-income communities. In certain areas, there is no safe playground. Sometimes you have drive-by shootings. Some of these families, unless they have a car and they can drive to a safer city, their children cannot play in safe playgrounds. Right? So playgrounds are really necessary. I'll come to the sensory part in a bit. Employment is a big deal. Right now, I'm in the journey of creating a home-based business for Ben where he's working on things like creating t-shirt printing, water bottle printing, heat transfers. So we get services, money supports from the government to train his skills. But again, that unless you're aware, you won't even know what to apply for. And systems are similar everywhere. Not every parent is availing the services that exist. I actually was inspired by moms here in India. There's a group called Autism Kochi. When I would see the amount of work, few moms who came together and put their resources together, I was inspired. I started asking questions to my service coordinators. So my inspiration actually came from parent groups in India. They didn't learn this formally, but necessity is the mother of invention, right? Independent living. This is a big deal in the Western community. Of course, me with my Indian upbringing, I cannot imagine a day Ben would be living away from us. So we are trying to work with our siblings to make sure there is a system after us. Then the issue of lifelong parenting. There is no empty nest for some of us parents, right? Compound caregivers. What does that mean? Having one child with a disability and maybe a second one, or you have a parent with dementia. We call sandwich caregivers. There's a lot other. Caregiving is a big issue of its own. That's where a lot of my research is now focused on. How can we manage caregiving stress? How can we make their life a little easier so the family stays together as a unit and doesn't collapse? So for me, as far as my journey as a mother, I want to focus on the stages of acceptance so that you're aware. When you meet a mother, how can you help her in her journey? Like I always say, we all have problems. We don't ask for problems. Problems visit us. But so maybe we don't need people asking, why did this happen? How can we face this together? Right? So that's why I want to tell you how I walked through acceptance. What is my reason for hope? The key word is growth and development can be slow, but is steady. I always have to calm myself down with that. When I see other children my son's age, and I feel disillusioned, I say, no, Ben is still developing. As long as I'm investing, I'm giving him opportunities, there is always hope. I have to remind myself that. And we as friends can remind each other. Because I didn't get this from a developmental pediatrician. I didn't get this from a therapist. This mantra, this keyword I got from another mother whose child was 4 years older than mine. When Ben was 3, when I visited her house, this is one thing she told me. So let me show that picture before I go on to, this picture is what I want to show you. You know, this is about height and age. It's just a simple growth chart, but there is no chart of what I have in my mind. The point is cognitively, if there was a chart like this about their cognitive development, for normal children, there will be growth spurts and plateaus, right? They shoot up, then they stay like that. Then again they go up, then they stay. This is about physical height, but I wish I had one about cognitive development. So in my mind, I always remind myself of a chart like this. Ben may not be going up like this. He may not have many of these growth spurts. But what is happening is there is a steady trajectory. If you can see my mouse, sorry, I don't have. But the point is, it's a slow trajectory. Eventually, he's going to get there and he's going to keep developing. So I studied personally the life story of the first case number 1. There's one person with autism who was diagnosed by Leo Kainer called Donald. In his life's journey, he still lives independently in the US. He would set life goals for himself, right? At 30, he wanted to start a bank account. At 40, he wanted to travel by himself. The beauty of this is if you don't compare yourself to others' journeys and you believe you have your own life journey, you can get there. You may miss some of the spurts. So in the spurts, mothers tend to get disappointed. So this is how I encourage myself and try to encourage other moms. Keep investing. As much as early intervention is important, so mothers of teenagers and adults can get really disillusioned. Parents, fathers don't even come into the research equation because they don't want to talk about these things. At least mothers answer our surveys. What we tell them is keep investing. It'll work. And that is our challenge in therapy world. Therapies stop at 18. But we have data to say that even children who are independent in their daily activity skills, there's a big longitudinal study done in Wisconsin that shows that around the 30s and 40s, adults with autism and other disabilities lose their independent living skills because there is no therapy, there is no maintenance. It's like a lifelong of, maybe they don't need every day, 3 days a week, but there is a need for sustained intervention, not just sitting at home, especially if they're not meaningfully employed. So quick run back. Then once you find your hope, it's about learning to navigate systems. Right now I'm in the stage of, much of my research is focused on empowering aging families to plan for their future meaningfully, because more than half of the parents, even in the developed West, know that they will die before their children, yet they fail to plan. It's really that denial. So that leads me to this picture. Acceptance is a cyclical stage. This is the famous Kubler-Ross's death and dying stages. You start with denial, you move into anger, bargaining with God. This is a point where chaplains, a lot of religious systems can capitalize and exploit families, right? Sometimes, okay, God will do this for you if you do that. We have seen exploitations. Or even they make their own deals. The reason people make all these pilgrimages is that bargaining phase, right? Or if not religious system, other ways. Then they go through depression. Then there is acceptance, but it's not a stable phase. That's why I draw a cycle. You can still go back, right? So basically most families you see are cycling through this at any given time, right? So then there are days you might go through denial at a certain age. No, he's going to get out of this. So adulthood is usually a time it does sink in. That's just to remind you of these stages. So when you meet angry families, that's not necessarily the time to educate them about the need for intervention. Recognize it's a stage, they will come out of it. Give them space. So as far as reactions to diagnosis, I love this quote by a mom I met at a conference. I felt like I just got run over by a truck. That's literally how some parents feel. But there is also relief, because till then you were blamed for being a bad parent, right? If you were I got that, because one of the theories in autism is the cold or refrigerator mom syndrome. You are cold, you're not hugging your child, that's why your kid doesn't want to hug you. Because I was doing my PhD, I got a lot of that. You're more focused on your academics, that's why he has these symptoms. You need to quit, you need to be at home. And but there is relief. At least you know there's a reason your child is like that. Why me, right? We all go through that. It's not just one time. This is going to be ongoing. Even like perhaps a few days ago, I would have asked, why me? A blaming approach versus let's walk together. And today you might not have any family member and you're wondering why I'm sitting here. You were just told to be here. Even if you meet any mother with autism, any father with autism, any sibling who has a brother or sister with autism, I would say let's walk together. That's the key word I want you to remember. We can do this together. The reason I'm presenting here is my sister-in-law and my nephews are watching my son, right? We need those informal supports. And I can tell you from our research data, I'm part of a network where we look at data on family quality of life from over 40 different countries in different contexts, different economies. I'm just the data person. I like to keep it all together, to put our research efforts together. What we have seen is informal supports is an area that is the lowest ranked. It doesn't matter whether you're in rural Nigeria or advanced Sweden, where we think it's a perfect society. Every family does not, they rank lowest in terms of their satisfactions from informal supports. What is informal supports? The support we get from our friends, relatives, neighbors. Like if your child wanders, does your neighbor bring your child back, right? Or does someone offer to come and watch your home or maybe clean your home while you are out with your son, right? Simple things. I know here we have more help. It makes more sense in the West where it's hard to get hired help. It's very expensive to actually bring in a cleaner. But those are the things. We've asked these questions to families. What will improve your quality of life? Nobody says, I want more therapy. In the beginning, they do when they're getting through diagnosis. But later, it's simple things. I wish somebody could watch my child while I go get my hair done. Right? That's all they want. Or sometimes it's like, let me just be with my son while somebody cleans my kitchen. So it's those simple things that actually improve a person's quality of life. So let's walk together. Enough people have asked them why. It's because of this, it's because of that. Like the other day when we were going somewhere, we had to go to a church service and Ben got lost in the elevator. And nobody asked me why didn't you watch? Even though that question comes in. Instead, we just find him and we move on. Right? Can we move on in life rather than question and analyze and retrospect? Because that is heavy burden for any family. And now what? It's one day at a time. Can we prioritize our goals? I know I'm running out of time, so I'm going to skip forward. So as far as an OT, I have a lot of insights, but I'm not getting into it for the lack of time. Key things I want you to remember, it's the fastest growing developmental disability. 1 in 36 children are going to grow up to be adults, so you're going to see them everywhere. How do you handle, even if you're fixing a fracture as an orthopedic surgeon, because of their autism, it's so hard for me to take my son for a blood draw, to keep track of his sugar levels, because our systems don't have a way to, unless we put him under anesthesia, we cannot. Can our blood banks have better ways to hold them down? Because it's not even the pain, it's that sensory, that anxiety, right? Intellectual disability and sensory processing disorders are real. What happens after early intervention, that transition to adulthood? These are my 3 themes as an OT that I present everywhere. But I'm not going to go through these details for the lack of time. But what are the 7 senses? Touch, hear, sight, smell, taste. Proprioception is the pressure-related information, and vestibular is the movement-related, why they need swings, why they need heavy workouts, trampolines, large playgrounds. There is a need as a society for us to have these systems. So what is sensory processing? If you ask me, it's like that GPS, right? Our ability to take in information from the environment, organize it meaningfully, right? Like when Google Maps tells you to go this way, that way, reroute, our children cannot do that. It's all jammed in their head. That's in a simple, when sensory signals don't get organized, there is a neurological traffic jam. And we see this manifest as poor handwriting, clumsy behavior, behavioral problems is the symptom we see. So instead of doing the Band-Aid approach, what we need to do is actually spend time for sensory processing therapies and centers and inclusive. I always advocate for inclusive. Like I used to love shopping at a store called IKEA because they had a ball pit, they had swings, and they had free childcare. We could drop off our child for 1 hour while parents shop. That became my favorite store more than any therapy place. I could drop off Ben with his siblings, and they were getting free sensory therapy, in my opinion. Right? So I'm not here to advocate for more therapy centers. It's needed, but we need more external supports. So let me quickly scroll through and come to my ending, which is, like I said, much of my life is on measurement of family quality of life. What are the best predictors? Don't you want to know what makes a family the happiest? How can I have the best quality of life? And I have this phrase called Doberman wearing a lipstick. A mom around my age or younger, let's say a 10-year-old upwards, the mothers you meet can be angry mothers. I've heard this. Why are you always angry? Why are you reacting? Why are you snapping? And one mother in a qualitative interview actually used this. I call myself a Doberman wearing a lipstick because we are tired. We're always fighting for services. Unless you fight, you don't get it too, right? So those are the 3 insights I have as a social scientist. And just to give you an idea what is family quality of life, it's defined as the extent to which family needs are met. That family members enjoy their life together. Family members have a chance to do things that are important to them, right? Not what is important to us. Sometimes we think they need to be in therapy. Data says, according to ABA, that a family should get 25 hours of therapy per week. But maybe that family is going through a stage where there's another pregnancy, there is death maybe among the in-laws. They might be having so much they cannot devote that time to therapy. And in such a family, when we yell at them saying, why didn't you do the home program, you're actually weakening the family unit. It happened to me as a student when I was working in Nambike Nilayam in Vellore. I remember talking to a young mom and advising her we should be doing more therapy time. I remember her, that was a wake-up moment for me. She was a young IT professional from Kochi who had come to Vellore and was staying with us to understand how to do therapy. And as a young student intern, I remember telling her, this is how you should have done this home program, then his head control would be better, something like that we were talking. And she just broke down crying, saying, I cannot do any of this. If you want, take my child and work with him. That was a wake-up moment. And she said, I would never ask for this. None of us asked for this experience. Of course, there are adoptive parents who've asked for it. But even in that case, they have their moments, right? So that's when I realized how important it is to understand caregiving stress. But just quickly, in terms of research, family quality of life is a long-term outcome in intervention studies. The short-term ones that we put in our studies are stress and burden and things like that. This is more of a long-term outcome. If nothing, if you ask me, no matter what kind of child intervention study you're doing, please measure family quality of life. Of course, contact me for the long version, short version of the surveys. The reason I say is at least you can predict who is a responder, non-responder. Maybe the reason that family did not show positive outcomes in your therapy, that child didn't improve in the brand new protocol you came up with in your brand new center, is because they had things happening in their family. It has nothing to do with your therapy, right? So at least we can say who are the responders and non-responders. What level of stability do they need to participate in this level of intense therapies? We need to keep that in mind. And I just highlighted this because when we say family quality of life, I use a survey, an international survey that has been validated in several countries. We look at health of the family, finances, family relationships, informal support, service support. Actually, the reason families come to us is for services, whether it's a psychiatric help, medication, therapy, whatever it is, our point of contact as medical professionals is in domain 5. They come to us for services. But we have done mathematical models to find out which are the best predictors. Out of this, we can compute something called family quality of life. When we do a regression model, we have found that service support is never a reliable predictor. It's not even significantly correlated with family quality of life. But families come to you saying, I'm here because I want to know how to get physical therapy, how to get OT, how to get speech. We're just a list among the 21 services, even the medical specialists. What matters is our informal supports and your leisure and recreation and community interaction. Are they holed up in their apartments or do they come out and interact? And in each of these domains, we ask them, is it important to you? Do you have opportunities? This is why I said playgrounds, right? We need to create opportunities for families to come out and participate. Initiative, attainment, how much are they trying to? We look at not just satisfaction. So there's a long version, short version of this survey, and really even 2 days ago we just got accepted on one of our papers with aging families where we trained our families, paired them with family support navigators, meaning they're older parents who've stayed in the system, paired them with younger families, taught them how to navigate systems, how to call Medicaid and get these services, how to call your local electricity. There's so many services available. Out of that, what we found when we looked at the predictors was informal supports. Not even the therapy we gave. When we looked at our outcomes, it's informal supports. That's the only reliable predictor of what actually matters to families. So even if you don't take anything away from this presentation, remember you're part of an informal support network of one child with autism. Be there for them. And if you can take it to another level about leisure and community participation, look for opportunities to create those spaces for them, safe spaces for children to scream, to yell, to do what they need without blaming them or blaming the family. And family relationships, many of these families are on threads. And I think one of the biggest disadvantages with ABA is the amount of money, at least ABA meaning intense behavioral therapy. And family relationships are put at stake and values are super important. I'll stop there and open it for questions.
I would like to get questions from the audience first. Anybody? Okay, I will ask Preethy another question. Supposing I'm God and I'm going to an opportunity to live your life all over again, last 21 years. What would you modify? I'm talking from conception, when you got married, till today.
If you give me a chance to make a change in my life, I'd probably not live with autism.
So you're still denying it?
I would ask for a child without autism. That's the honest truth.
Yes, that is a total correction.
Yes.
How could you have prevented? Do you think you can say anything about it?
Oh, yes. For my youngest, I did. I know I'm talking to professionals, PharmDs, but I'm just being honest. I was careful with the immunization schedule with my third one. With my second one, I didn't know. I did the same 5 shots at every visit. With my third child, we did something called the stagger schedule, and we were very careful about how many shots we gave at every visit. Only one. I'd go back. I had to drive. What that meant is instead of once a month schedule, once a month visit where they give you 5 shots at each visit. I strongly believe that there is a predisposition to get autism, like maybe there is a predisposition in my genes. But also that 0 to 1 immunization schedule, in my opinion, is too loaded. So with my youngest, I was extra careful. Does that answer your question?
Okay, I will take it with a pinch of salt.
Okay,
because
but that's just me as a professional. Yes, I'm aware of the data. There is no data by the pharmac company saying that it causes it, but I was not comfortable doing 5 shots with a 2-month-old, 3-month-old, 4-month-old.
The second is prevention again. Now, you live in the US,
Yes.
you take a lot of processed food. You don't take green leafy vegetables. Now, we all want mothers in the antenatal period to take folic acid and iron. The moment the baby is born, there's no more folic acid. Do you think there's any contribution about this in the neurogenesis and synapses formation?
Possible, because mine wasn't like a planned pregnancy, just happened after marriage, so I wasn't intentional about my diet, so I can't comment. But I know as far as dietary approaches, I get a lot of questions. We've tried a lot of gluten-free, casein-free diets for Ben. I've never seen a behavioral change in his younger age because of that. But there was a time I was very sincere about it after post. But
That is about 3 years
yeah,
plus.
later. During the recovery journey, we've tried dietary changes.
Okay. Because now what has come out in autism is that there is something called a critical period. The first 1,000 days. From conception till 2 years is the first 1,000 days. Then you have a window period. We say that at the age of 2 years, we all have about 15 billion neurons sitting in our gray matter. They are all looking for synapses.
Yes.
These synapses are not connected. It's like a plug and a socket. If the plug is there, there has to be a socket. If either of them are not present, what happens is the connections don't come. So that is why your early stimulation matters.
Yes.
So in this period when you have nutrition, breast milk, you have the weaning period with a balanced diet, and then you have a lot of feeding problems. Children don't like texture because everything is getting blended now. So what happens is when a child is given a textured food like Thor and Mercury, they spit it out. Right? It continues into life. So all these, I think there's a neurologist sitting there, our synapses are not getting connected. So the multipolar synapses which should happen, they all remain either bipolar, they are not myelinated, I don't know.
It's possible.
Do you think there is any studies that you have found out about this? Because there's a lot of investment of...
Personally, my son Ben was the easiest to feed. We didn't deal with sensory textures. I've seen other children. Even now his diet is the most healthy and balanced. He eats all the vegetables, all the textures. If anything, he doesn't like processed meats. So naturally, he doesn't eat it because he doesn't like chewing meats.
So there's imbalance of many neurotransmitters now, and they're trying to use melatonin and serotonin, dopamine stimulants and all that. That is one thing.
Yeah.
The last one is, again, as I told you, identification.
Yes.
Do you think if you had identified it at 6 weeks of life?
Possible. I would have loved to. But to me, it was my
That
father.
is something I want the audience to take home. When the child is born, if the baby is able to see, the baby, you'll find them looking at the light and the fan. But by 6 weeks of age, there's something called social smile. Only if the mother sits with the baby, locks his gaze with hers, there's something called eye contact.
Yes.
So if we can pick that up, that's what I feel. Like all the high-risk babies, we need to do an intervention from that point. Even the doctors make a mistake. Doesn't matter. We also have to take.
You're right. When we went to our pediatrician, in our case, it was my father-in-law who first told me, go check his hearing. For us at around 12 to 18 months, he was not responding to his name while he was playing with toys. And when we took him to the pediatrician, they said, oh, he's a bright child, because they were looking at the splinter skills. They said, no, nothing is wrong. Even at 2.5, when we started seeing self-stimulatory behaviors, the pediatrician was saying no. So actually we got success with the school system. I called the early education to come home and evaluate. The pediatricians kept denying.
So this plug and socket synapsogenesis is very crucial. So I want everybody to understand that if your baby doesn't have a social smile by maximum 8 weeks, you have to be sure that he has hearing, you have to be sure that he has a vision. And by 9-10 months, you should be able to play with him in a manner called joint attention. Look at the bird. Two people connecting and talking about an object. Joint attention. Then a child, most of the time they are scared, stranger anxiety is there. But by 1.5 years to 2 years, the child is able to imitate. And after 2 years, they can play with another child of the same age. That's very, very important. Pointing, playing with another child of the age, it's a sort of interplay between two people of the same age group. A mother or an adult can understand the baby. But if a baby cannot play with another baby of the same age after 2, that is between 2 years and 3 years, play school pondi oru samayama. That time, again, that is a red flag there. So 3 flags. One is social smile not appearing by 6 to 8 weeks of life, early diagnosis, early intervention, much extra stimulation, they will become normal. Number 2, 9 to 10 months, joint attention. You walk around with a child, you should be able to look at the star, look at the bird, look at the tree. That connecting, if it is not there, go and find out what is happening. The last is parallel play, interactive play. A child should be able to play with another, his cousin, sister or brother or his neighbor of the same age.
For me, I would say aside from social smile, looking back, what we missed was grabbing. We used to say this, he would hold, he had the ability to hold, he had the ability to roll. So qualitatively, his milestones, he had achieved it, but he wasn't meaningfully using it. Even though he could roll, even around 8 months, I remember my husband had to roll with him on the bed to make him roll. So when they asked us, does he roll? We said yes, but he doesn't do it. So qualitatively, we saw a problem in his milestones. But yeah, I had joint attention. I can't find the slide, never mind.
Okay, so this is again, what is activities of daily living means? It is a EEG in child development called eating, eliminating and grooming. The child should be able to do this by adapting to his environment. If not, please make him do it. Don't postpone the whole thing. Okay, I think we shall wind up. Anybody wants to ask, ma'am? Girija, ma'am.
It was a very informative talk, Dr. Preethy. Thank you so much. Sharing your academic as well as your personal experience. But one of the slides showed the diagnosis, age of diagnosis was only 5 years. It was too shocking. Because actually when it should be detected as early as 1.5, 2 years. And I'm surprised why it is so late in girls. Why it is so?
Girls are actually a little more challenging. For one, it's a 4:1 ratio, 4 boys to 1 girl. And in girls, I think the manifestation is a little different. Even in adolescence, it's hard to manage girls because for girls, it's harder to begin with. We are all relational. Boys, put them together, they can do an activity.
But I don't agree with you in that aspect.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know, but I know this is the data that I have, right?
So thank you so much, Dr. Preethy, for that very, very informative and eye-opener of a talk. We are privileged as an institution to have you here talk to us. And it is said that it takes a village to raise a child, and it takes an autistic child to raise the consciousness of the village. So I'm sure that as an institution, as a family of health professionals, you have raised our consciousness, and we will work towards being that informal support system for children with special needs, especially autistic children. Thank you so much, and as a family, can we all give a big round of applause to Dr. Preethy for coming over and giving us this eye-opener of a beautiful talk. Thank you so much, Dr. Preethy. We are grateful. Thank you so much. Thank you. With this, we end this session. Thank you all for coming. Have a wonderful day. Thank you. Dear friends, tomorrow we have a very important session. It's a special edition of Quest. We have this once in a few months, and this time around it's going to be our beloved director, George Chandy sir, who is talking on a very compelling issue, that is the gut microbiome. So looking forward to having you all again back tomorrow. This will be after the chapel service at 8 a.m. The chapel service will be at the amphitheater. Again, Dr. Philip Finney will be talking to us during the chapel service. Immediately after that, at 8:30 a.m., we start the special edition of Quest. So looking forward to having all of you for that as well. Thank you so much.
When I sit back and imagine life without you, I can't fathom how I ever thought I'd make it on my own. And there's at least a million reasons I'm still standing here believing you're my comfort, you're my healing. This I know. This I know. You can't see the wind, but it moves the leaves from the bottom to the top of the tallest trees. You are everything I'll ever need, and they can't take that from me. Oh, really?